Welcome to the Autosportradio.com 2020 show. I'm your host, Don Kay, and we are once again coming to you from the fine facilities known as the Grant King Race Shops here in Indianapolis at 8155 Crawfordsville Road. And hopefully, if ever this virus thing slows down, we can open things up. You want to come down here. It's a great place to visit, great cars of all kinds, mostly vintage cars, of course. So if you get a chance, you want to come on down, take a look around. And also I want to mention the Grant King Shops is coming up with something for the holiday season. There is a fanny pack. There is a ornament for your tree. And I also have a backpack, all of which have the Grant King logo on them. So if you got a kid, a race fan or something, you'd like something different, they got it. And it's not out quite yet. However, you can email Stephanie to get the information on where you can order it and when and so forth and so on. Just email her at grantkingshops@gmail.com. That's grantkingshops@email.com. She's got gmail.com. She's got some really interesting things, and if you got a young kid going to school wanting to be something different, I got it for you. The backpack, the fanny pack, and the tree decoration. Today's show is presented by Honda and Honda HPD, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, the NTT Indycar Series, SVRA, and McGilvery's Pub and Eatery and Speedway. And if you haven't been there yet, you need to stop in. It's been remodeled. It's still non-smoking. Good place to stop. Do you ever have a thrill of going to see a dentist? Most people go, oh boy. Well, I can tell you a dentist, you'll say, yeah, I'm going tomorrow. The Indy Dental Group. Indy 500 veteran Dr. Jack Miller and his wife, Dr. Liz Lewis, have a superb practice. You'll love it, I guarantee you. So call, make an appointment. You'll be glad you did. The number is 317-846-6125. And if you have a fan of IndyCar racing and are looking for something special for Christmas, I got a solution for you. The Indy500shop.com. That's the Indy500shop.com. I've been to his warehouse. Good grief. If he doesn't have it, it doesn't exist. So if you're looking for something, check it out. Or you can give Michael Spangle, the owner, a call. His cell number is 317-985-0214. And if you have computer problems, which I do from time to time, we have a new computer guide, A+ Affordable Computer Doctor. And the doctor is Steve Freeze. And you can call him, tell him your problem. If need be, he'll make a house call. His number is 317-328-0766. You ever wonder what it'd be like to drive your favorite car in your favorite racetrack? For the dirt midgets at Chili Bowl to the Formula One car at Nürburgring, Indy Simulation can put you in the driver's seat of their Sim Experience full motion race simulator. Take your choice of over 160 cars and tracks in the iRacing, the same simulation that professional drivers use to race their real world rivals. Learn new tracks and stay sharp between races. Visit indysim.com today and book your free demonstration ride. And if you haven't been to the museum, it's probably a good thing because they just are closing it now because of the virus here in the area. They don't want to pollute the place, so they're shutting it down. But when you get a chance and it does open up again, which will be in about 2 or 3 weeks, I think, you want to see the the Andy Granatelli exhibit. It's really quite interesting. Have you ever wondered why these guys and gals love to drive the Indy cars? Well, why don't you take a ride in the Indy Racing Experience 2-seater? You'll get the thrill of a lifetime, and you'll get to see what it's like and feel what it's like to go fast at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway or wherever they run around the country, the various IndyCar events. To book a ride, call 317-243-7171, talk to Shonda, or go to indyracingexperience.com, find a date that works for you anywhere, and set it up. And in the promo box, put DK1, you get a 50% discount. If it's time to get new insurance for your home, your car, your commercial property, do what we've done. Talk to Mike Pardee at VP Insurance in Speedway. He's got good coverage, and you'll find you get better coverage for less money. So give him a call, tell him what you need. He'll help you out. The number is 317-248-0070. And if you are a vintage car buff or a Trans Am fan, you need to go to svra.com and subscribe to Speed Tour Magazine. It's a great first-class publication, and you'll love it. Great stories, great pictures, and it's very interesting. And while you're there, click on the schedule tab and see where they schedule for next year. They've got the 18 or 19 events on the schedule. It just added a new one. So check it out. You'll be glad you did. And if you have a vintage car that needs restoration or you want to get one, the Grand King shops can help you on either board. So give them a call. The number is 317-820-3595 and see what you got or what you're looking for. They can help you. My guest today is a gentleman that I've had the pleasure of knowing for, I don't know, 5 or 6, 7, 8 years. He's been into the vintage racing and had classic racing time show that's was on display. They had events around. He has pulled away from that at the moment, but he has a newsletter. It's called Classic Racing Times. It is an interesting newsletter and some great stories about people you might have heard of but don't know anything about them. We're going to find out. And the thing that's gotten a big hit this past issue is the Wolfgang von Tripp's story about a guy who was a German royalty and he ended up driving race cars. It's an interesting story, and we're going to talk to the man who put it together, who was the editor and publisher of Classic Racing Times. Coming to us from the East Coast, please welcome Mr. Gary Mondschein. Gary, thanks for being here.
Don, it's always a pleasure to be on the fastest hour in motorsports. We've been on your show several times. I don't know how many years it's been, and I stopped counting a long time ago. But your show is the best. Everybody knows it. And if you want to know what's going on, the heartbeat of American racing, you got to tune into your show. Having said that,
I know you're going to send me a bill now. I know. Okay.
Yeah, we'll invoice you, make checks payable. Having said that, we were involved with on-track events for vintage cars for several years, 7 years to be exact. And we ran races at our mainstay, which was Pocono Raceway, for all those years. We also ran events at Phoenix International, Iowa, and we did some other smaller things at Oswego and some other tracks with Indy cars, which worked out very well. Unfortunately, the overwhelming liability that I was incurred in running these events, it caused me to stop. As a matter of fact, my lawyer threatened to fire me if I didn't stop promoting events. So having said that, we no longer promote on-track events strictly because of the liability. There was a lot of work involved in doing it, but it was more than rewarding. There was no money to be made, but I don't think anybody does any of this to make money. But it was really rewarding to see the camaraderie amongst all the vintage people and the modern people, which, a lot of the modern drivers would always come through the pits and rubbing elbows with the big boys, the Johnny Rutherfords and the Unzers of the world and the Andrettis. It always warmed our heart when they came through the vintage pits. However, we're no longer going to be promoting any type of on-track events, obviously because of liability.
And what happened? How did you get hooked on motorsports? When did you start? I think you drove early on, didn't you?
Yes, I'm a third-generation racer. My father raced in the 1920s and 30s. He ran flat-track motorcycles. He was a house rider for Indian. And he ran from late 20s, I guess 28 to about 34. And each year they had 5 house riders, and he was the only one to survive for that 7-year period. My father raced midgets, 3/4 midgets, and sports cars.
Uh-oh, sound went away.
Myself, I raced ARDC midgets, sprint cars, and I did a little champ car racing as well. Actually, I raced everything from go-karts to champ cars at one point or another for about 30 years. And the Vintage Act I've been doing for the last 10 or 12 years.
It's amazing how you get into this sport, and it's probably like a lot of the major sports. You get into it, it gets in your blood, and you can't get rid of it. And the thing I've always found interesting is how intelligent the guys and gals are that work on these cars, from the tires to the fuel to the suspension. I mean, there are women that are quite up to speed as to how to make these cars go. It's an interesting mix of people, and I think they're about as smart as anybody I've ever run across.
There's absolutely no doubt about that. When you get to the racetrack, whether you're working on a car or racing, if you're male, female, black, white, red, green, plaid, it doesn't matter what your skin color is, doesn't matter who you are, you're another competitor at the track, and everybody has talent, and your objective is to beat the next person. And that's just the way it is. Everything at the pit gate, everything changes once you get through the pit gate.
How did you find when you had the Classic Racing Times series, the competitors, were they excited, interested, and did you draw good car counts?
Yeah, we actually did draw excellent car counts. Our main event was Pocono each year, and we grew that into an enormous event. And it wasn't just vintage. We set up a 5-mile oval on the front stretch where we actually raced 3/4 midgets, micro stocks, and go-karts. We ran a road course division where we had a lot of formula cars come in for the road course. We obviously we ran vintage Indy cars, champ cars, and sprint cars on the 2.5 mile, which worked out very well. And we also started a stock car division the last year we ran. We had upwards of 300 teams check in with us at our last event in 2019 at Pocono. Now, obviously, the Indy cars are not going back to Pocono right now in the short term. I am still very close to the management of Pocono, and I cannot speak for them. However, I do know that Nick Agowski and his group would love to have IndyCar back into Pocono, and it would just be a matter of dealing with the powers that be at IndyCar and getting a couple of minor things fixed up and straightened out.
Well, I think I was at the first Pocono race, and I think the place was phenomenal. Dr. Mattioli put together quite a program there. Of course, he had help on how to design it, but that's quite a facility and very fast. Fun to watch.
It is very fast, and it's got 3 distinct turns. The track got a little bit of a bum rap over the last several years with it was a fatality and some other issues. But if you go back and look at the fatality and the other issues we had, it really, really, really wasn't the track's fault. If you look closely at the circumstances, none of that was. One was a freak accident. Another one was just a racing accident that happened at the start of the race, and one car became airborne. And I don't want to get into a lot of details, but if you go back and really look at it, you know, somebody got into the fence, and that can happen anywhere, really.
That's for sure. Now, the COVID has stymied a lot of things. Racing is one of them as well, as everybody knows. But I have heard the rumor that on the East Coast, there's new tracks being built.
Well, Don, you've heard right. First of all, Bridgeport Speedway in South Jersey, which is a stone's throw away from Philadelphia on the Jersey side. Since 1972, Leon Manchester, a stock car driver, built the original track in 1972 as a 5/8 mile dirt track. And it had a spotty history for all of its time, sometimes good, sometimes not so good. I had the pleasure of running there in their sprint car division for a few years, and I loved the place. A big, flat, wide open 5/8. I loved it. And when I heard they were going to dig it all up with the new owners and completely change the track, I was a little bit annoyed. They were talking about going to a smaller track. I would have liked to have seen, at that time, I would have liked to have seen the 5/8 stay, and they were going to put a 3/8 mile in. But they dug it all up and completely redid it. And I heard a lot of positive things, but I was very reluctant to go. This past weekend, I went. They had a big 3-day race weekend. I went to see the URC sprint cars, and they had a modified show, 100 lapper on Saturday night. And I got to tell you something. It is amazing what they did. They built like a 3/8/4/10 high bank track, high banked. The track, I don't know how wide it is. It's got to be, I don't know, 100 feet wide. I don't really know. It's ridiculously wide. I saw sprint cars 4 or 5 wide going through the turns. It was probably some of the best racing I've ever seen on the East Coast on dirt. Amazing, amazing job.
Isn't there another one out there somewhere being put together if it's not built already?
Well, it's not built yet. The East Coast was popular, very popular back in the day with fair dates. A lot of fair dates, whether it was Allentown or Lehighton or whatever, a lot of fair dates back in the barnstorming days and all the way up through like the 70s and 80s. Bloomsburg Fairgrounds in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania, which is out Route 80 a bit. That track ran midgets from the 50s through the mid 80s. The last time they ran midgets during the fair was 1985. And a guy by the name of Midge Miller flipped the midget out of the track and into the fairway of the fair. And that was the last time they ran. The track has not exactly sat idle. They've done demo derbies and other stuff during the fair each year in, year out, which the fair is held, I believe, the last week in September. Anyway, long story short of it is there's a new group in there that has romanced the fair board into taking out the half-mile track, which is a cinders track right now, and building a 3/8 mile dirt track, keeping the same main grandstands. And they've got, as far as I know, they've got approval from the town. They've got the fair board behind them. And I guess they got the financing because they're talking about breaking ground within the next week or two and actually building a 3/8 mile dirt track, clay track there. They are talking about running a limited schedule, which is very interesting. A lot of local tracks are starting to look at cutting their schedules back and doing bigger and better shows, but less. And I think that's not a bad idea.
I agree. Now, we were talking about, and I showed a copy of, Classic Racing Times. Now, I know you have a successful business, but you do a lot of research in writing the articles you write. I mean, there's other writers that submit stuff to you, but the business you have, where do you find the time to take and research like you have here with Wolfgang von Trips? You don't just open a book and find it. You got to look for it.
Well, one of our top writers, his name is Jim Shantz, and he's an excellent statistician. He's really up on a lot of history. And Jim and I talk quite a bit about different stories that we feel need to be written. Everybody writes about, I'm going to give you an example. We were talking about some tragedies in racing, and everybody writes about, obviously, what happened at Indy in '64. It's been written many, many times, terrible tragedy. They write about Le Mans in '55, terrible tragedy. But everybody forgets about the Von Trips tragedy, where not only his life was taken, but several spectators' lives were taken. And how that all affected racing and affected the psyche of Jimmy Clark. Jimmy Clark was directly involved in that event, in that race, in that accident. It was really, really, Phil Hill, it was really, really an interesting, I don't want to put a positive light on it, but it was an interesting story that nobody talks about. And what we try to do, like some of our other editions, we talked about the Forgotten Fire at Linehorn. There's a lot of different stories that we try to bring up that are simply not getting the coverage that they should be getting.
It's very interesting. And the other thing is, if you're into cars and so forth, particularly older vehicles, you have a classified section on the back page. So if you're looking for something you never know, you might stumble on and say, look at this. This is what I wanted.
Our classifieds have been very popular, believe it or not. This year alone, we sold over 10 cars. Over 10 race cars were sold to our newsletter. And I like to brag about it a little bit, so people are reading it. The reason why, and I've said this many times, the reason why I don't put the newsletter on the website is because I don't believe people actually read when they go to a website verbatim. They don't really read it. Now, I'm going to say something that's a little funny, but it's the truth. The best thing is to have a hard copy on good magazine quality paper, because when I go to people that I know have a subscription to the newsletter and I have to use their bathroom, I see it on the toilet tank in the bathroom. And that tells me that they're reading it more than once.
I never thought.
Am I right or wrong? Am I right or wrong?
You're right. You're right. You have several cars of your own. I know you've made trips back and forth here to Indianapolis getting cars restored and so put together, fixed, whatever. How many cars do you personally own right now?
I'm glad you asked that, because you're going to be shocked to hear this.
Uh-oh.
I presently own one race car.
Really?
Wow.
What happened to the others?
I'm telling you, my intuition, for some reason last year, I had this crazy intuition to sell out before this COVID thing hit, before everything. And my intuition is really pretty sharp. Every time I go against my intuition, I'm wrong every time. So if my intuition says to sell out, I sell out, and because usually there's a reason why. And I sold 22 of the 23 race cars I own. I had Indy cars, Champ cars, Sprint cars, midgets, TQs, you name it. My truck, my trailer. I actually ran a garage sale and sold 90% of all the tools and everything I had. I completely sold out. I kept one race car, which is a car that my father and I built together in 1972. And I'm going to take that out once in a while and run that and have a little fun. That doesn't mean I'm out of vintage Indycar. I had rides lined up this year, obviously because of COVID, we didn't get out. But I had a ride lined up for Indianapolis. I had something cooking for Milwaukee. I do plan on getting out and running vintage Indy cars, except in other guys' cars.
Oh, well, there you go. That's right. Drive somebody else's car. Well, obviously, if you sold your transporter and your tow vehicles and your tools, you're going to have to get in somebody else's car because you can't fix yours.
Well, one thing that's been pretty fortunate for us is I've gotten to drive, I believe it's 26 different Indy cars in the past 8 years. We've kept track. And in a lot of these cases, we've worked with the owners to help them get the cars set up and get them running right. I have PJ Kirschbaum is one of my main guys, and he comes along with me, and he's my alter ego. He keeps me calm down at the track. And between him and I and a couple other guys, my stepbrother, Mike Casario, we tend to go in and some of the guys, not all, most of the guys know what they're doing, but there are some guys that own the cars that just need a little helping hand now and again. So we'll go in there and I'll take a guy's car out and, you know, I'll come in and I'll tell him, well, you know, you need to adjust the chassis, you need to do this, you need to do that. And we usually get them straightened out. So that's helped me to get into a lot of guys' cars. Also, if I take a guy's car out and it's a complete disaster, I just make one lap, come in, I say to the guy, take the car away from here and fix it up. Don't go out, you know? So that's pretty much been our MO last year or two.
You know, it's a shame you shut down because it's obvious that vintage racing is still growing, as would be shown by Sports Car Vintage Racing Association. Tony Perella and SVRA has got a pretty stout series coming up this year. There's a lot of interest in it, and they draw good crowds from what I've been told. And they just ran this past weekend at COTA, and I understand the crowd there was quite good. So
there's no question
racing is still there.
There's no question that Tony has built a beautiful empire in vintage. I have the deepest respect for Tony. I feel, speaking from a vintage IndyCar standpoint, that we're grossly underutilized. At the Speedway, and there's been some different management at the museum that's handled the Vintage IndyCar program. Their hands, from what I understand, were a little bit tied with the main management at the Speedway, but we've really been underutilized. There are so many people that show up at the 500 that don't even know that we're pitted back where we are pitted under the tents. And there's really not a lot of advertisement telling anybody when we're on track. They put us on track at 7:30 in the morning. To me, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Really underutilized. If I had a chance to run that program, or if I did have the chance, I would have done something earlier in the week, a little bit of Barnum Bailey setup, where I would have had what I called a startup. I would have brought the guys right down the main street over there, and I would have had them all line up and fire up the cars and do a parade and run them right down and in through the museum on, let's say, Wednesday night, and get the fire department involved, get everybody in the town involved, and make a parade of the vintage cars going into the track. And that would actually, you know, support the event and get a lot of action going on it. And there's a lot of other ideas I would have to do, but, you know, I feel we've been very, very underutilized, grossly underutilized.
I think Tony would agree with you on that. As you're aware, and anybody involved in sports, motorsports in particular, but sports in general, are aware that there's new ownership and stewardship of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, the IndyCar Series, and the IMS production. Do you think that the transition in ownership is what is good? In fact, probably right now saved a lot to do with IndyCar racing, the series and the Speedway, of the transition to Roger Penske?
I'm not going to say it's good or bad. I'm going to say a change was needed. What I am going to say is I suspect there are going to be a lot of unpopular decisions coming down the pike. And there are going to be some things, nothing's forever. Nothing is forever, okay?
Yeah.
And I don't want to get really into detail what I think is going to happen, but I suspect there's going to be some major, major changes. Well, let me put it to you this way. A lot of the European drivers that are coming up and getting the rides in Indy cars, they chose a very interesting career when they don't want to run ovals. That's a very interesting career choice. Why would you choose to go drive an Indy car and then not want to run an oval? Okay, makes no sense to me. Okay, ovals is really the heart, the backbone of IndyCar. So they're starting to get traction. These guys coming in, these newer drivers coming in, are starting to get traction and forcing the hand of the road course. I'm not against road courses. I'm all for it. Matter of fact, I'm for dirt racing too. Okay, I wouldn't mind seeing them having to run the dirt. You know, Tony. I talked to Tony. I talked to Tony Kanaan about that, and Tony would love to have been able to run the dirt, okay? But the fact of the matter is, nothing is forever, and there could be changes on the horizon that may be shocking, but they could be coming.
Well, one of them shocked me was there's a 20 race schedule for the Road to Indy program, and the Freedom 100 is not on it. They are not going to run the Indy Lights in the Freedom 100, I'm told.
Yeah, I saw the same thing.
I'm not sure why.
I
I'm
don't want to get into a lot of detail on my opinion on that. I think that's a mistake.
So
I think Roger saw that immediately. Although they don't draw a lot of cars, their actual races were excellent.
Oh,
okay.
Probably some of the best racing in the world is the Freedom 100.
Very entertaining racing, and I enjoyed it. And if most people that you talk to that have seen it, they enjoyed as well. But to do away with the Freedom 100 and to push the vintage cars out of the way, and to not utilize the vintage cars, and to cut down on this and to cut down on that, you're going to water down the event in its entirety. And as much as the Indy 500 is the basis behind the month of May, it's everything that wraps around it. It's an event, okay? It's a whole event. And I'm not just talking about, the stuff that happens at the Speedway. I'm talking about the night before the 500, the champ cars at the fairgrounds, the little 500. This is an event time. And you start watering this down, the people are going to stop coming.
Well, I certainly hope not, because I still want to go. And I still enjoy it. I would like to see a couple new added to the schedule for Indy cars, and Pocono would be one, and Kentucky would be another one that I think would be good. But the interesting thing I found, and I have yet to run into a driver that's driven in Europe or in Formula One have come here. You're right, they're a little concerned. In fact, the driver from Haas, I forget his name now. Magnussen. The driver from Haas that's leaving his Formula One team is interested in IndyCar, and he said at first he had no interest in the ovals, and he said that now there's only 3 of them. Maybe that's something worth looking at to understand. Because I've had drivers, I said, how do you like ovals? The first time I got on, it scared me to death, but now I love them. They love it. They even like the short tracks in particular, like Iowa, which is now off the schedule, and Richmond. They like the shorter tracks.
Good morning, Wade.
Well, here's the deal on the ovals, all right? When they start looking at the ovals, they're probably thinking about Texas. And I happen to think Texas is a really entertaining event, okay?
Oh, I agree.
And I think what they're looking at is how close and how long they run wheel to wheel, 3 wide, and the speeds they're running. And it scares a lot of those guys because they've never done that. I'm not going to beat up on them because it just happens to be the way it is, but they've never run 3 wide at IRP lap after lap in a midget, okay? And they've not gotten used to that. Right. Or they haven't run the King's Royal in a sprint car wide open all the way around, slide jobbing and just barely missing each other and running 2-3 wide there. I can go on and on about the types of events, but that is really the basis behind running these bigger IndyCar shows. I'm talking about the way the ladder used to be, but it's still these ovals. These IndyCar ovals are based on the way it used to be, okay? Right. And these guys, as much as the American guys need to get road course experience, the European guys or the South American guys, and they're all talented drivers. I'm not taking nothing away from any of them. They're all talented drivers, but they need to get oval experience as well.
Well, I agree. And I think, as I said, most of them, once they got used to it and got over the fear of the speed and so forth, and they get used to running side by side, and they love it. They really enjoy it. It's not an issue. Several have backed away, of course, but that's the way it is. It's, to me, when I started following IndyCar seriously and started coming down to Indianapolis in 1964, to me, it was the most exciting racing anywhere. And that's all they had was ovals. I mean, we'd drive wherever the race was the next weekend. We were there. I'd leave, and I had a television show in Chicago, so I'd load up my cameras and off we go. Went to Canada and they wanted me to pay a $10,000 fee to bring my cameras in because they thought I was bringing up there to sell. I got out of that, fortunately, but to me, it's exciting racing, and I hope they can add 1 or 2 more ovals to the mix. And I think there's some tracks available. having said that, I think this Memphis race or Nashville race next year is going to really be something. I've had the COO of the Grand Prix of Nashville on the program a couple of weeks ago, and what they've got planned there is going to be spectacular.
Well, it's a new venue. It's a whole new program. Hopefully it will work out. Hopefully it will work out. The concern I have, like it's always been in racing, is the cost of putting on these races anymore, these major national events. The money that's outlaid, it's just astronomical what it takes a promoter to do this. And the roll of the dice, the way they do this, they can't take 3 or 4 years or 5 years and really wait for the money to come in to even break even. There's so much money involved that they got to make money right away. And what ends up happening, and you've seen it time and time again, an event will come on the schedule, it'll look like a golden earring, and it'll be over in 1 year. It'll be gone. So, and it could have been a great event, but unfortunately, the amount of money it takes to do this anymore is actually hurting the whole sport.
Well, I agree, but I think that there's the IndyCar in particular, because in IndyCar, unlike Formula One, when you go to a Formula One, you watch a Formula One race, you're going to assume that Lewis Hamilton's going to win. And probably his teammate will be right behind him and so forth. But in IndyCar, there's anywhere of 8 or 9 teams that are drivers that can actually win the race. So it's kind of exciting to watch, I think, to see just what's going to happen, because there's so many talented drivers and this competition is so close. You can't help but enjoy it.
I agree with you on that too. The competition is great. The racing is great. There's no denying that. What I would like to see in IndyCar is I'd like to see sort of a freezing of the rules. I wrote about this in my editorial in this latest edition of Classic Racing Times. Yeah. If there was a way that they could freeze up many of the rules, the chassis rules, for the next 3 years, especially this being this COVID year, where it was very difficult to keep your sponsorship money flowing. You could save, the teams can save a lot of money over the next couple of years. And then for the bigger teams that are just going to buy new stuff anyway, but would have to be new stuff that matches what the existing stuff is, they could sell their stuff to entry-level teams. And perhaps you can gain more teams in IndyCar. I would like nothing better to see a couple of Saturday night drivers, in an IndyCar, and it could be at any of these tracks, and then maybe take a shot at Indy. And for me, I would hang my hat on a guy that ran locally and that got a shot here at Indy. And I know a lot of people would do the same, and I'd like to see that. And I'd like to see a way of doing that. Furthermore, I think going forward, if they were to change, I'm not a rules guy, I'll be honest with you. All right, I leave that up to other people. However, if IndyCar was to adopt a rules package similar to the Top Fuel dragsters, what the Top Fuel dragsters do is they regulate the cockpit. Okay, you have to run a specific cockpit, but everything forward and back of the cockpit, as long as you're within the measurements of the car or whatever, you're allowed to run. Now, right away, you're going to say, well, what about the aero packages and all this business? Well, if they limit the amount of downforce and they limit the amount of aero package you're allowed to run and make the guys have to lift, and you give the opportunity to a lot of teams to just buy the center of the car and you build the rest of the car, I think that would open up the sport to a whole bunch more teams. I would personally like to get together myself with maybe 5 other businessmen and be able to afford to buy into an IndyCar team, something along these lines, get a 19, 20-year-old hotshot, local hotshot that's winning all the races, put them in a car and give a shot at this thing, just like it was at the old days. But we can't do this, with the 7-figure amount of money that you need to do this. It's just entirely too much,
Well, I'm going to put you in touch with somebody that might kickstart what you'd like to do, and you can get involved in it to some degree. Because I think next year there's going to be maybe two teams, maybe 3 teams coming in. Of course, Jimmy Johnson's coming on, but that's an existing team with a car. They made a move and got him in there. And I think there's a local kid, I'm sure you've heard of, Cody Swanson, who was, in fact, he was down at Daytona this past weekend running. He can drive anything.
Right, he's running Ken Keeholz's car. And Cody is a great guy. Great ambassador of local racing. And he's getting some road course experience now. And that kid has a boatload of talent. boatload of talent.
And he drove in the rode the Indy program. The first race he won it.
Yes,
So
that's
he
correct.
he has the talent, and I think somebody will pick him up rather quickly because he's been wanting to get in, and he's worked his way, and he's finally getting a shot. So I think there's some growth can be involved. Hopefully this virus will tail off so things can get back up to full speed again next year. I will be surprised if it does, but I certainly hope it will. And I'm sure you would like to as well, so you can go out and get in somebody's car and run around the racetrack.
Yeah. I honestly, once things get back to normal, I'm still around, and I'll get around the country, and I'll get to the events that I want to get to. And, we'll see where the future goes for us. But for now, we are very, very much enjoying putting out our newsletter. If you go to our website, www.theclassicracingtimes.com, you can sign up for the newsletter. It's very, very popular. We mail it all over the country in Canada. We actually have people in New Zealand, Australia, France, and Germany that get it. It's extra postage, obviously, for that. But it's a very popular newsletter, and we're very proud of it. And we have several writers. Local writer Linda Mansfield out of Indianapolis has done quite a few wonderful pieces for us. Kevin Triplett, several writers. So we're very, very happy with it, and we're going to continue to do it.
Well, I have my copy, and I read it. I haven't bought a car yet, but then I think I'm too old for that anymore. But it's very interesting, and I got to say it takes somebody a lot of work. And I do notice on here that your Jim Schwan's helps you put stories together, but it's fun to read stuff that I've heard of the drivers but never heard about their history, and I'm finding some of that out thanks to you. So I hope to see you at one of the vintage events this coming season, hopefully, and if we do, we'll say hello.
I will certainly go out of my way to look for you. And once again, thank you for having me on the Autosports radio program, Don. It's always a pleasure, and I'm sorry I couldn't be there live in the bar there that you usually run it in. I can't remember the name of it right now, but
we haven't been in there since February.
McGilvery's, right? Yeah. I always have a good time sitting there listening to the show and have a beer and a steak or whatever they gave me there. Good time. And maybe next time I'm on the show, we'll be there. We'll break bread together and have a nice night with all the great people that usually show up there. So,
well, if you happen to be in the area for whatever reason, buying a car, selling a car, putting a car together, looking for a spare part, give me a holler. We'll have we can go to McGilvery's and have a beer anyway.
We'll make that happen. All right, Don.
The city of Indianapolis and the county of Marion will not allow. I think it's down to 50% again, I believe. So we won't be there for a while. But if you're in town, be glad to. Thanks for your time. Look forward to your next edition. This one is a September issue. There'll be one coming out in the not too distant future.
Yes, we're ready to go to press on that in about a week on the next one. And the continuing story on Wolfgang von Trips. This was a part one in this edition. We'll wrap that up. And we have several other stories that we're working on, for the future. And like I said before, we're going after stories that you kind of know a little bit about, but you really don't know the whole story. And that's what we're trying to do.
That's fun reading. Thanks for your time. Thanks for what you've done for racing in this Classic Racing Times. If you haven't got it, he told you how to subscribe to it. TheRacingTimes.com. Look it up, subscribe. It's really worth your read, believe me. And it doesn't take more than 1 or 2 visits to the John to read it the second time.
Love it.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
You got it.
We have been talking with Gary Mondschein. He's the editor and publisher of the Classic Racing Times. Get it for yourself and keep up with that. And I want to remind you that holidays are upcoming. You got a kid that would like a fanny pack. Here's one with the Grand King logo on it, checkered as you can see. We have masks that go with it. And then, of course, the backpack, checkerboard backpack. And I can assure you there won't be many kids that have one of those. So here's where you get it. If you want to find out about it, go to grandkingshops@gmail.com. And Stephanie will clue you in as to how and where to get the stuff. Until next time, this is Don Kay saying we got some upcoming programs scheduled, so we'll see you in the not too distant future. Until then, thanks for being here. Good night.